There are very few things less enjoyable than trying to figure out which tight end you should start in fantasy football. But the fantasy playoffs are here, and no teams are on a bye, so we should have plenty of options, right? What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone's doing well out there. Today we dive into my top 15 tight end rankings for week 15. Now, like I mentioned in the opening, the fantasy playoffs are right around the corner, and we want to see your fantasy playoff teams. So do me a favor, take a screenshot of your fantasy football team, and then tag us either on Instagram or on X. We would love to see a lot of the teams out there that are taking home the hardware this season. Now, we're going to get into the week 15 rankings here in just a second, but first, let's see some of my bigger hits and misses from week 14. And when we start off with the bigger hits of the week, we had guys like Juwan Johnson, Jake Ferguson, and Pat Freiermuth. Now for Juwan Johnson, it all started in the waiver wire show. I told people to pick him up, and then I threw him directly into my top 10 tight ends on the week. He ended up finishing as the tight end 3. How about Jake Ferguson? I had like 306 comments as to why I did not have Jake Ferguson ranked inside my top 15 tight ends last week, especially since Kyle liked him a lot more than I did. Then Jake Ferguson went out and finished as the tight end 22. He ended up being one of my bigger hits of the week, and I can also say, suck it, Kyle. But Patty F was another hit as well with the Pickens injury. We had to boost Patty F up inside the top 10 overall tight ends, and he finished as the tight end 4. But we had some big time misses, guys like Tucker Kraft, Brock Bowers, and TJ Hawkinson. For Tucker Kraft, well, this one goes to the fact that I expected this production to go the way of Jaden Reed, and Jaden Reed didn't do a damn thing. I had Tucker Kraft way too low. For Brock Bowers, it sucks to have one of the best tight ends in football finish as the overall tight end 16. It wouldn't have mattered where I ranked him last week. Everyone was going to start him, and he absolutely sucked. And then lastly, TJ Hawkinson. This one is simple. I expected big things from the Minnesota offense last week, and we got it. What I wasn't expecting is 3 touchdowns going the way of Jordan Addison. That ended up hurting TJ Hawkinson, and I had him ranked way too high because of it. But that wraps up week 14. Now we're moving into week 15, starting off here in tier 1. And when we look at tier 1, we got the likes of Trey McBride, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, Jonnu Smith, and David Njoku. Now for Trey McBride, he's going up against New England, and his usage here as of late has been elite. He's had at least 12 targets now in 3 straight games, 31 receptions over his last 3 games. He's had at least 7 fantasy points in 9 straight, and the Patriots allow over 9 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. The target share alone is going to keep him on top of the rankings here this week. Then George Kittle going up against the Rams. Now when it comes to the tight end position, the highest weekly ceiling has to be George Kittle. With the run game hurting in San Francisco, you have to think that Kittle will be relied upon once again, and the Rams allow the 10th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Then we got Brock Bowers going up against Atlanta. 4 catches for 52 yards against Tampa Bay is a straight kick in the Dick Van Dyke, if you know what I mean. Now Aiden O'Connell is hurt, and we could have Desmond Ridder. Plus, Michael Mayer played similar snaps last week, but got more targets than Brock Bowers did. We're seeing more 2 tight end sets in Las Vegas, and a lot less defensive attention on Michael Mayer. That's going to add some risk weekly to Brock Bowers. Then we got Jonnu Smith right here going up against Houston. All the way up to tight end 4 on the season, but just had his worst game in a month. However, still scored 11.9 fantasy points, even though you had to wait a long time in that game to get them. Now his volume, it did fall off last week, but the bigger issue here is the matchup against Houston. They're pretty solid against opposing tight ends. They allow the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position, and then we round out tier 1 with David Njoku going up against Kansas City. Now great volume and a great matchup is enough to keep him high in the rankings weekly. Kansas City allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to tight ends, and Njoku has had 30 targets over his last 2 games. However, there is a big but with this one. There is now news coming out that he may end up missing this game with a hamstring injury, so we need to keep an eye on him for the rest of the week. As of right now, he's still technically questionable, but if you own David Njoku and you are planning on starting him here this week, I would have a backup plan just in case. Now, before we dive into tier 2 of the tight end position, I gotta shout out today's sponsor, Turtle Beach. And take a look at this headset. This is like the Cadillac of headsets. I can't hear a damn thing right now. But what I do know is that Christmas is right around the corner, and you gotta buy a lot of Christmas presents. Now, maybe you're like, Jake, I'm not a hardcore gamer. What am I gonna get at turtlebeach.com for me? Well, it's not just gaming accessories. These headphones right here, sure, they're great for gaming, but half the time my son's upstairs listening to music on them. So to answer your question, they have Bluetooth wireless headphones, they have keyboards, they have mice. Now yes, they also have some killer gaming accessories. Things like controllers and racing simulators, flight simulators, whatever it is you need, they have you covered this holiday season. But go do some Christmas shopping and get it at a little bit of a discount. Because for a limited time only, you can head over to turtlebeach.com and get 10% off your order using the promo code Headliners. That's right, that's 10% off your initial order at turtlebeach.com using the promo code Headliners. More information down below in the description. But all right, now we head into Tier 2 tight ends. And in Tier 2, we're going to see Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, and Pat Freiermuth. Now for Travis Kelce, he's going up against Cleveland, and we've now gone a good month without a good game from Travis Kelce. The ball is just being spread around too much, and Kansas City has clinched, which means we could be in for a scaled back usage of Travis Kelce down the stretch to ensure he's 100% healthy heading into the playoffs. Then we got TJ Hawkinson going up against Chicago, and Hawk is out there looking like the kid left out on the playground that no one else wants to play with. Jefferson and Addison are absolutely feasting, and TJ Hawkinson is just getting scraps at this point. In a matchup this week going up against Chicago, they do allow the 12th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position, so he remains in Tier 2. Then we got Sam Laporta going up against Buffalo, and the volume has really come up here the second half of the year, which is great. He's had 6+ targets in 5 of his last 6 games, but he has yet to have a good fantasy day without scoring a touchdown. So he has to have a touchdown. The problem there, he scored a touchdown in only 33% of his games this season, and that's why he's still down inside of Tier 2. Then we got Mark Andrews going up against the Giants, and a lot of the same things can be said about Mark Andrews that we said about Sam Laporta. Andrews needs a touchdown to be startable in fantasy football. Now, luckily, he scores touchdowns a lot more often than Sam Laporta. Andrews has 6 touchdowns over his last 8 games played, but this is not the easiest of matchups. The Giants allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Then we got Zach Ertz going up against New Orleans. He's coming off the bye, and he has been a solid starting tight end most of the season. He's the current tight end 10 overall, has 3 straight games with over 11 fantasy points, and Washington has to do whatever they can to keep winning ball games. Then we move down to Patty F to round out Tier 2. He's going up against Philadelphia, and you have to think he's in line for more targets due to the injury of George Pickens. He's also had a touchdown now in back-to-back games. The Eagles are pretty solid against opposing tight ends, but Pittsburgh is going to have to throw the ball if they want to have a chance at winning this ball game. Which only leaves us Tier 3 then, where we have the likes of Grant Calcaterra, Tucker Kraft, Cade Otton, and Jake Ferguson. Now first, Grant Calcaterra going up against Pittsburgh, and I would love to have him higher, but I have a feeling with all the news of A.J. Brown being disgruntled, I have a feeling he is about to be fed. And with Devontae Smith healthy as well, may not see as many targets going the way of Grant Calcaterra, hoping for some red zone looks. For Tucker Kraft next, he's going up against Seattle. He's a big play waiting to happen. But how hard is it to trust any pass catcher in Green Bay? Plus, at the time of this recording, we don't know if Romeo Doubs is going to be able to return this week or not. If he does, that's going to make this even more difficult. However, Seattle has been pretty vulnerable to tight ends here as of late. Trey McBride has cooked them over the last month of the season. How about Cade Otton here at 14th overall going up against the Chargers? He had a slight bounce back game last week, but still nowhere near what he was mid-season. And that is totally crazy in my opinion that they went away from him. Now he's a little bit more of a safe floor guy, but really needs a touchdown to be viable. Now with the matchup going up against the Chargers, they're a top 10 defense against opposing tight ends, so this one is not going to be easy. And then lastly, to round out Tier 3, it's Jake Ferguson going up against Carolina. And hey, look who snuck back up into the top 15 for me this week. That'll happen when you face the Carolina Panthers, a team that allows the most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. We know that Ferguson is going to get the targets, but like we've said for many weeks here, with Cooper Rush under center, he just kills the ceilings of players. He just does not push the ball down the field very often. And because of that, we get a bunch of dink and dunk opportunities for Jake Ferguson, but in a good matchup, we're hoping for that tutty here in Week 15. So there you have my top 15 tight ends for Week 15 fantasy football. Now, just like you, I'm going to set my lineup and cross my fingers. I'm just hoping a few of these fantasy tight end studs can carry us through a few more weeks. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, do me a favor by hitting the like button if you haven't already. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get out for the day, but hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.
Analytics, off the chain, all the channels, not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.